Her voice has come to symbolize the Holocaust, one victim among the 6 million who spoke for them all, a testament to all who perished with her. Anne Frank died aged 15 in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in early March 1945, possibly the 7th. Born on the 12th of June 1929, Anne and her elder sister, Margot, lived their early years in Frankfurt. But in 1933, following Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, the Franks, as a Jewish family, became concerned for their safety as the Nazis introduced increasingly fanatical anti-Semitic legislation. In late 1933, Anne's father Otto was offered and accepted a business opportunity in Amsterdam. In February 1934, his wife and daughters joined him in the Netherlands. They were not alone. Of the 500,000 Jews living in Germany in 1933, about 320,000 had emigrated by 1939. In May 1940, Hitler launched his attack against France and the Low Countries. Rotterdam was heavily bombed and, on the 15th of May, the Dutch, fearing further losses, surrendered. Life for the Jewish population in Nazi-occupied Netherlands became increasingly intolerable and dangerous. In July 1942, Otto Frank received an order to report his eldest daughter Margot for a work camp. The Franks, fearing for their lives, decided they had no option but to go into hiding. Thus, on the 6th of July 1942, the Franks moved into their secret annex, behind Otto's business premises at 263 Prinsengracht, and in doing so left their flat in a state of chaos to give the impression of a family on the run. The annex consisted of 3 floors, its entrance concealed by a large wooden bookcase. They were to live in this self-imposed incarceration for over 2 years. From the outside, the Franks were provided with food, provisions, news, and humanity by a small group of Otto's trusted business associates. A week after moving in, they were joined by Herman and Auguste van Pels and their 16-year-old son, Peter. On the 16th November, they were joined by a German dentist and veteran of the First World War, Fritz Pfeffer. Anne and Peter had a brief dalliance, which, although pleasurable, was, for such a young girl, confusing. For Anne, becoming aware of her sexuality but in such a confined and claustrophobic atmosphere, and tainted with the lack of normality and the constant nag of fear, it must have been unbearably confusing and difficult. But there was always the solace and consolation of her diary. Anne had always shown a propensity to write, and on her 13th birthday, a month before their flight, she received from her father an autograph book. With its thick blank pages, tartan cover and lock and key, Anne was delighted by her present and immediately began using it as a diary. As with many a teenager, a diary is a constant companion and source of comfort, allowing the writer to express their feelings, their frustrations, their fears and hopes for the future, and their beliefs and changing attitudes. And so it was for Anne, an ordinary girl with an extraordinary talent, in extraordinary circumstances. The last entry in Anne's diary is dated August 1st, 1944. Believe me, I'd like to listen, but it doesn't work, because if I'm quiet and serious, everyone thinks I'm putting on a new act and I have to save myself with a joke. And then I'm not even talking about my own family, who assume I must be sick, stuff me with aspirins and sedatives, feel my neck and forehead to see if I have a temperature, ask about my bowel movements and berate me for being in a bad mood, until I just can't keep it up anymore, because when everybody starts hovering over me, I get cross, then sad, and finally end up turning my heart inside out, the bad part on the outside and the good part on the inside, and keep trying to find a way to become what I'd like to be and what I could be if only there were no other people in the world. Yours, Anne M. Frank. 3 days later, on 4th August, Nazi security police, led by an Austrian called Karl Josef Silberbauer, burst into the annex and arrested the Franks and their companions. They had been betrayed, but by whom we will never know for sure. The call was taken by Silberbauer's commanding officer, a SS lieutenant called Julius Detman, who merely said the call had come from a reliable source. Following the end of the war, Detman was arrested and interned as a prisoner of war. He committed suicide in July 1945. Otto Frank was giving Peter Van Pels an English lesson when the Nazis entered the annex. On seeing Anne, Silberbauer said to Otto, "You have a lovely daughter." He couldn't believe that the Franks and their friends had been in the annex for over 2 years. As proof, Otto showed Silberbauer the pencil lines where he had charted Anne and Margot's growth since 1942. The Franks, the Van Pels and Fritz Pfeffer, the German dentist, were taken to a prison in Amsterdam, then to the Westerbork transit camp in the northeast of the country. On the 3rd of September 1944, all 8 were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland on the last train to leave the Netherlands for the extermination camp. Immediately on arriving at Auschwitz, Otto was separated from his wife and daughters. He never saw them again. He did, however, remain with Peter Van Pels and was reunited with Pfeffer. Pfeffer died in Auschwitz on the 20th of December 1944, while Peter was put on a death march out of Auschwitz in January 1945 and died in Mauthausen, Austria, aged 18, on the 5th of May 1945, the very day the camp was liberated. Peter's parents both died as well, his father gassed. In October 1944, the sisters were relocated to Bergen-Belsen whilst their mother remained in Auschwitz where she was to die from starvation. Margot and Anne, already weak, deteriorated further, and when a typhus epidemic swept through the camp killing almost 20,000 inmates, the sisters were amongst the victims. The exact date of their deaths is not known, but it was early March 1945, just weeks before the camp's liberation. Following the end of the war, Otto, the only resident of the secret annex to survive, returned to Amsterdam knowing that his wife was dead but unsure of his daughter's fate. He learnt, on returning home, of their deaths and received from friends Anne's diary. This man, his life devastated by cruelty and inhumanity, sat down and read the secret diary of his deceased daughter. He read of Anne's desire to be published, to be recognized as a writer, and decided to devote the rest of his life to Anne's work. He was to die in 1980, aged 91. The diary was first published in the Netherlands in 1947 and 5 years later in the US and the UK. The name Anne Frank rapidly became known throughout the world. 80 years later, and her name lives on, and Anne's diary, recognized as a timeless classic, remains essential reading for all humanity. Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment and please subscribe to the Savage Years channel. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of future episodes covering the World Wars, the Cold War, German, Russian, and Soviet history, and much more.